Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pixels, where we explore the heart and art of photography. I'm Beth Buelow, and I am so glad that you've decided to join me today. If you're looking for fresh inspiration on your creative journey, you've come to the right place. Today, we're talking with Nic Stover. Nic is a lifelong entrepreneur who turned professional photographer in 2020. Nic's primary way of interacting with others is through nature photography classes, where he hosts an outstanding speaker series that, as of March 2024, features more than 30 of the most inspiring educators practicing today. You can learn more at naturephotographyclasses.com. I'm really proud that this channel is made possible in part by Nature Photography Classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Nic works daily on his mission to help nature photographers who are interested in deeper connections to create more impactful images so that they can confidently and consistently express themselves. His commitment really comes through during our conversation, and I know that you're going to enjoy his insights. Let us know what was most useful or meaningful to you in this conversation by leaving a comment below. Your likes and your shares are always welcome, and I invite you to subscribe so that you are sure never to miss an episode. If you're listening to this in an audio-only format, you can go to the Pixels channel on YouTube or pixelspodcast.com to see the images that we reference during this episode. Hi, Nic. I'm so glad to be talking with you today. And you have a special place in my heart since you are one of the reasons this channel has even been made possible through your Inspired Creator Grants, which I hope maybe we'll be able to touch on a little bit at the end of our conversation. But it's a real pleasure to be chatting with you.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Beth, and I'm also super excited that I was able to support the launch of Pixels, and I'm so excited for what you've been working on and sharing with me all the way through the process. So this is great to see the culmination come together for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I want to just get started by hearing a little bit about you and how you got to this moment in your artistic evolution. You know, I've already introduced folks to you, but how would you describe where you are now as an artist?
Ever changing. I think, in the course of working with the various different artists and people on their journey, I do notice some people that know who they are as an artist, what they represent, maybe what they want their work to represent and where they're going. I also see people on the other end of the spectrum that have zero idea of where they are, where they're going, what they're doing, etc. And I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle on my artistic journey, but in particular, just that ever-changing and evolving part of my work and what it represents. And it's interesting because through the nature photography classes and the speaker series, I get to speak with a wide variety of photographers or photographers, artists, however you want to think of us. And we had Bruce Barnbaum on this week in the speaker series. And Bruce has been doing photography, for 50 plus years. In 1972, he showed images from, and he took an Ansel Adams workshop, for example, et cetera. And his theme of his particular talk was all these undiscovered images. He went back through thousands and thousands of 4x5 slides to put together an entire book of images he completely bypassed all the way through. And I think that was a powerful example. He's 80 now, and within his photographic journey, or Brooks Jensen, who creates lens work and the popular podcast, talks about, we're going out there within the field and we're harvesting our images and within there. And I think that's a lot of where I am as an artist right now, is sometimes I'm out creating for very specific types of images or experiences, et cetera. But oftentimes I'm creating and I'm capturing, and I feel like I'm, kind of harvesting for my future creative self, so to speak, for projects I may not know I want to do yet, or particular emotions I want to express for other book projects or other things in the future. And I think that's a really exciting thing. So I don't go out as an artist with preset parameters of, oh my gosh, I got to get this image or that place or this particular experience, as much as I'm going out there to be as present within the natural environment. And I think that feeds my artistry kind of all the way around on the other side too.
Yeah, I love, and I've not necessarily heard of that idea of not curating yourself to, so not being so precious with everything that you're
Yeah.
doing in the moment, that you're excluding things that might have, that tell a story and that might have you will relate to them differently in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's so Freeman Patterson spoke a week and a half ago. I'm kind of losing track of days now. But yeah, let's just say about a week and a half ago. And Freeman, for those of you, your viewers that don't know, he's written, 13 books, I think. The Joy of Seeing, the Art, the Creative Life, just a whole bunch of different things. And he's a Canadian. He's 86. And he talked about this one particular project in a greenhouse in Israel. And he was out there and he took over the course of several days, 3,000 plus images, and he didn't know why. And I think that's an interesting thing. So he shares of the whole reason and the rationale, and it's absolutely fantastic to hear his evolution. And I think that can be part of our photographic journey, is paying attention to when we're paying attention. Essentially, like, what are we drawn to, but not putting the pressure upon ourselves to know exactly why, but really following our artistic instincts that are out there. Because I've seen with lots of people, they have really solid artistic instincts about what they're drawn to, what they're gravitating towards, what's going on within their creativity. But then if you ask them, why, what do you like about that scene? They have no idea. But my hope would be that for all of us, in some point in time in the future, we could go back and say, oh yeah, I was going through this major life change, or I was drawn to this particular element because it represented this about me or something else, and which could be a rewarding part of the culmination of our artistic journeys.
Have you noticed that for yourself, since you're in this kind of phase and have this awareness? Is there anything that you took in the past that you didn't know why at the time that you look at now and you see a story there?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the early stages on some of the bigger stories, I think, so to speak, and my own personal journeys of going, overcoming different, obstacles and things. But I feel like there's a big part of my work where I was gravitating towards particular, maybe types of symbols that were deeper within my subconscious, or types of strength, or themes of hope or rebirth, or other parts and pieces of myself that actually had that opportunity for expression. And so forms, for me, without knowing it subconsciously, I think I was drawn towards, like many of us are, particular types of forms or organizations of forms that brought about, visual construction and elements out there within the field. So I was reacting without thinking or knowing what I was reacting to within the landscape and taking images. And then being able to look at some of those now and understand why maybe I was drawn to the particular flow or the structure within that kind of helped me to really recognize that some of these artistical instincts were there, and I was able to respond to those, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's very cool. You're making me think about we probably, as photographers, sometimes we go through different phases of really being drawn to certain things. And one of the things, it's not photography, but I draw mandalas. And I found during the pandemic that I started drawing angular ones. Instead of all being curved and everything, I was wanting triangles and squares and all this. And I think I posted online, like, what's up with that? And somebody said, there's probably some psychological need for structure or something concrete and more solid. And it makes sense that there's that psychological element that we might not realize in the moment, but we might have it reflected back to us or later be able to see what it was that was underneath.
Yeah. And I think I talk a lot of times about, icons, and the concept of icons and, photographing icons, and that's been beat to death, et cetera. But there's obviously, in a lot of places or instances, we as humans are just inherently drawn to certain things. I mean, most human beings, aside from the few haters out there, when you step foot on the floor in Yosemite Valley, you're going to be wowed by the awe and the just complete, enormity and wonder of nature when you're in a situation in a scene like that. Or you're going to be drawn, there's universal parts and pieces of where we're also drawn to other types of landscapes, or, things like prospect refuge theory, why we seek water, for example. Well, that's an element of nourishment. Or why caves, why do my cave images sell more than my other images? Well, that's a place of shelter that people can go to and feel like they can see their predators and their prey that's out there, but have a place and a feeling of safety and protection. So there's a lot of these ancestral parts that kind of go back into, who we're shaped and what we are. So it makes a lot of sense on your mandala thing, because you think, yeah, life before COVID was a lot about flow and maybe finding some of the beauty. And then that dysregulation we went through for that period of time certainly kind of came to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it makes me think, in addition to color theory, we also need to be doing sort of Psych 101. And, because everything you were just naming, I think would also be part of, explaining for ourselves what draws people and what kind of story we might be telling through the images, even in the way we handle them, present them, that sort of thing. So,
yeah.
So I'm curious I'm going to pivot to our pivot pixels, which is the part of the conversation. Yeah. Part of the conversation, because it seems like a good point, since you talked about being in evolution. This is where I want to hear a little bit about what images and moments or experiences you've had that led to this pivot in your own artistic exploration. And as we start with that, I'm just curious, I shared your bio and you wrote photographer in quotes. And I'm just curious what's the story with the quotes?
Well, it's kind of two parts on the quotes. One is, I don't think of myself as much as a photographer anymore as I do actually begin to, or I've begun to, somewhere in between, think of myself as an artist, which is a big part of it. The other part of the professional, being quotations, I do make my income off of, I'm very fortunate, I'm blessed. I should say, no, I'm not gifted. I'm blessed to be able to make my income as a professional photographer, through selling prints, through leading workshops, through my speaker series, through a wide variety of other things. But professional for me, connotates a huge amount of, can be like, I'm not doing this for the sheer joy or the love of it. So amateur, the root of in the words amateur, as many people know, is for the love of it. And so I'm out within the natural environment, experiencing the natural environment, not to pay the bills. I'm out there within that environment to really, bring forth that love and bring that love back to other people so they can go out and have the similar types of experiences. And so as a professional, I'm fortunate enough to be able to teach and impart, hopefully, some portions of my wisdom on other people. But I certainly don't want to bring that mystique, I guess you could say, that some people bring of, I'm a professional, there's nothing I have left to learn. You need to listen to what I have to say, kind of like that kind of a thing. So that's why I put it in quotations, I guess.
Yeah. And I should correct myself, because I said you put photographer in quotes, but you put professional in quotes.
Professional, yeah, exactly.
But you bring up that point about the photographer and artist. And that was a discussion TJ Thorne and I had when we spoke, was, how do you describe yourself? And is there a difference between those two things?
Yeah, and I think there's a massive difference. And I think maybe at some point in time, we'll talk about it. I inevitably, in every, conversation I have, talk about The Artist's Way, the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and my own personal evolution to finally start to see myself as an artist. Because I remember I used to correct people. Oh, I just love your art. No, I'm a photographer. This is my photographs. And now I actually can see that element within my work and how I create and how I select and choose within my scenes and my situations of what I want things to represent. Isn't just photographs. I mean, the photographs are the expression of that, but the artistry that goes into the actual, curation and cultivation of that scene is the right that I get to have as an artist. I get to make these choices and determinations, which is quite exciting.
Yeah. Nice. I love that. Well, let's take a look at some of the artist journey. So tell us, Nic, about what we're looking at.
Well, we're looking at Santorini, Greece. And so this is my first pivot pixel. This was in September of 2016. I had just left 2 months prior, my corporate CEO job, where I'd led a high growth startup company through a whole series of really exciting growth. But it really led me to this point in time of like complete and utter burnout and exhaustion. So we kind of did on what I would consider the redemption tour. So my wife and I did a fair amount of traveling, kind of coming out of that. And Santorini, we went for 4 days, and I was completely blown away by the beauty of Santorini, Greece, like pretty much any human being would ever be. And I remember on the caldera one night at sunset. So it's an old volcanic caldera, and it brings in a lot of that reflected light quality you see, in mountain environments or whatever else. But you're in the middle of the Mediterranean. It was absolutely stunning. And this was with an old Canon, PowerShot 10X, I think, shooting in JPEG mode. And this is way before I knew about processing or anything else. And I remember being just so genuinely moved by the beauty of that landscape and taking pictures both on my phone and with this Canon, and then getting home and wanting to share that with other people, and not feeling like the pictures didn't do it justice, didn't really bring forth what I'd seen or experienced out there. So this was a major pivot for me where I started to think about getting serious about photography, and what it would entail and everything else. And so within a couple months after this, I was shooting RAW. I was post-processing images. I was starting to understand, composition, starting to understand parts and pieces of exposure triangle and shooting in manual mode, et cetera. But it was that really, just absolutely dramatic landscape here that really pushed me towards wanting to represent and do it justice. I mean, part of the reason I don't do HDR or do, artificial AI within my work is I want it to be an accurate representation, as close as I can be, of what somebody could expect to see if they were standing in that same place or they went to that place and stood. So that's what I strive for within my photography.
Yeah. That's a philosophy. It sounds like that's really important.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that you are, that probably a lot of us can point to those pictures where we think, oh, that just didn't quite do it. And it nudges us towards that next level.
I don't get it right all the time. I mean, I'll still, like, I can't, how do I represent the beauty of the Nepal Himalaya, which I went in May of last year, or Antarctica in the year before, and truly bring that essence. You can't bring it back necessarily in one particular image, but I feel like I'm at least attempting to do a better representation of what I'm experiencing out there.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the next one. Tell us about what we're seeing here.
Well, we're seeing the worst case. This is an HDR image, and I particularly submitted this one for a reason, a couple reasons. So this, to many people, is known as Horseshoe Bend. I don't know, is it a symptom of, or the actual patient of, or however we want to look at it with regards to social media. And there's a lot of articles on there about just the growth of Horseshoe Bend and so on and so forth, the destruction of such a beautiful place. But this I went here in April of 2017, so it's about 6 months after I'd been to Santorini. And this was when I was photographing in RAW format, and I had my setup kind of dialed down, and I went there for sunrise, and really felt one of those, deep connections to a sense of place, regardless of how many times you'd seen about this place or heard about it. It's absolutely fantastic. The river does a 270-degree bend around the horseshoe. It's just really beautiful. Yeah. There's about 15 of us there at sunrise that morning, a mix of photographers and people just out there seeing it. It was really great. This was also the point in time when I was on social media. I'm not on social media, haven't been on social media for 5.5 years, where I got my first repost. So I posted a sunrise image from there. It got reposted and picked up. And, there was a little bit of that affirmation or that validation I probably was searching for as an early stage photographer, a little bit of that kind of dopamine hit maybe of like, wow, this is things, but also a huge part of like, well, this is going to, kind of start the process, or people think my work's okay, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Fast forward 6 months from there, We were out in Utah with 4 of my really close buddies for my 40th birthday. And I've been taking them all around to different places within the Page, Kanab area. And we went out. I was like, we should go out to Horseshoe Bend. Let's go. And this was right at sunset. And we went out there. We got kind of a little bit closer, and it was chaos. Absolute chaos. There was bachelorette parties going on. There was busloads of people rolling up there. There was like people celebrating with beers and loud music and the whole thing. And it was one of those times within my photographic journey when it was like, this wasn't about celebrating nature. This was about being seen within nature. I want to be seen. I want to be seen as one of the people that's out there. I don't really care as much about my connection within there. So that was the last time I went to Horseshoe Bend. It's been 7 years and counting, and I hope to never go back there. I want to do a workshop in Page coming up, but I've already told my clients I'm not taking you to Horseshoe Bend. So go see it ahead of time or afterwards. But also for me, I produced this image in particular and put it out on socials for that kind of affirmation I was looking for. And it did well, by all standards or whatever else. But I realized pretty quickly after it wasn't a representation of my work. It wasn't a representation. So in that period of time from when I started my photography in Santorini to this point, which was about a year, I realized I drifted just in that period of time away from how I wanted to represent or what I wanted my work to represent. So this became another kind of powerful pivot for me to be like, that's not what I want my work to represent. I'm not here to photograph what will do well on the gram or whatever else. I need to find parts and pieces of myself.
It feels like it makes me think of women who post a picture and they say, no makeup, and people are like, "Oh, that's so brave," and because I wanted to say it feels brave not to be on social media as a visual artist, as a photographer. And I don't know if you would describe it as brave. What
I was told by more than one photographer who's well known that will remain nameless. He or she will remain nameless. That I was committing professional suicide when I got off of social media in 2018. And plenty of other people that told me, you're never gonna make it. You need to be on that. It's everybody's going these days. Kind of all the way through. And I would say, for the first 6 months, I possibly regretted that choice and the decision. But what I discovered really quickly was my mood was no longer driven by how many likes an image was getting or how many followers I picked up or how many reposts were happening, et cetera. And when I was out within the field, I wasn't creating for things that would fit the 1x1 Instagram crop or whatever else, or I didn't care what I was posting out there. So that really helped me to kind of solidify where and how I wanted to photograph. But then when I made the decision to start to grow my online photography classes and courses, it really helped me to cut through a lot of the noise and find my audience, find the people that were really going to tune in and connect to my type of work, the work I was doing, the people I could bring, what I was wanting to teach as the people that were ready to make journeys in their photography, not just hit like and move on to the next image. So I don't regret for 1 second the decision. It's not for everybody. I would say it was the right decision for me without a doubt, though.
The word authenticity comes up. Like, you followed what was authentic for you. And when you're showing up that way, that's when you attract the people that have that you have that resonance with. And that's why you succeeded in spite of the people that said, "Oh, professional suicide."
Yeah. Well, and it's so, without digressing too much, but authenticity is the number one, it's going to be the number one destroyer of AI in my world, in my opinion. So I get the question a lot of times. Yeah. Why aren't you concerned about AI? And, what do you think AI's, impact's going to be on the photography business? And there's so much good information out there written by really, really well thought out photographers and educators. But for me, it simply boils down to people want authentic process and product. People want to feel the authenticity when I sell them a print. They want to meet the artist. So they don't want to buy an AI thing. They want to meet the artist in my booth, have the conversation, come to my home studio. people want the authentic experience when they take a workshop or they go out in the field, or they, participate in whatever else. And AI is not going to have that authenticity. So it's going to see that surge in a lot of regards of people just like me in this case. I could have created an AI image like this without even going to Horseshoe Bend. So that's going to attract a certain number of people that want to create the illusion that they're connected to the natural environment, or they're out there, or they're getting these experiences. But in the long run, my audience wants authenticity, and that's who I want to be and what I want to represent. So I think it's an opportunity for us to really kind of, those of us that are authentic, and there's lots of great photographers out there that are genuinely real authentic people. We can get only better through this process, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I feel like I have to look at the calendar, because a year ago today was my first time in Death Valley. And I was taking a workshop with TJ Thorne and Alex Noriega, who are also, I think, in that, authentic category. And being a landscape photography newbie, I developed an entirely new level of appreciation for what it's like to be on location and in that environment, and how it changes the image, how it changed how I perceive the image based on what I knew that it took to get there and to get it, and to have having that experience.
Exactly. And those two guys are the definition of authenticity and genuineness. All the way through in their work and what they represent and how they teach. But I think people, they lose sight of the value of actually being on site with other people in particular, but seeing the landscape through other people's eyes. And so my wife surprised me for my birthday a while ago. We have to plan so far out, but we're going to Norway in 2 weeks. We'll be in on the ground in Lofoten Islands in less than 2 weeks, specifically for Northern Lights photography. And she signed me up for a workshop. And so I had to fill out the questionnaire this morning. Actually, this is kind of funny, of all the things, and, tell us a little bit about your photography and so on and so forth. Then it was like, I'm a full-time professional. I support myself through this, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of it, and throughout the process, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn as well how you see the landscape within your natural environment, how you connect to your landscape in this particular area, how you view your connections to the Norwegian culture, et cetera. Like that for me is exciting. Like I'm not coming in with this prescribed notion of things. And it's funny because sometimes you'll be at that place where people are taking photos and somebody will say, well, can you take a photo from us? And I've heard so many photographers say, well, yeah, I'm a professional. I'd be happy to take photos of you. And I'm like, I would never in a million years advertise I was a professional photographer. If somebody asked me to take a picture of them in front of Half Dome, it's just like, that's not authenticity to me. But
yeah, I'm with you. Oh, well, I can't wait to see the Norway images, whatever emerges.
We hit the lottery. We're in like this 45-day window of what's considered the best aurora activity in the last 10 years and for the next 10 years. Wow. So I'm already going to need to be putting the memory cards on ice. I think I'm going to be blasting away for 8 days of photography in Lofoten in the middle of winter. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go nuts.
Wow. Batteries, memory cards.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the good stuff. Well, let's take a look at the third one that you shared. So what about this one?
Well, I think I would consider this one the authentic part of me. But I would also recognize this is, that pivot into the professional mindset. So I took this in July of 2020. And this was right before I made the decision to go full-time into photography, and, maybe declare myself as a professional. So this is a foxtail pine. It's a relative of the bristlecone pine, which we see. And this was on a backpacking trip up in the Sierra, the good old Range of Light, John Muir's Range of Light, just an absolutely incredible spiritual place in so many regards, that the granite monoliths and everything else. But the interesting thing about the Sierra that I've discovered after years and years of backpacking up there is it's not great for sunrises. And I had many years of getting up for sunrise and being completely disappointed. And the reason it's not great for sunrise is it's adjacent to Death Valley National Park. So in the middle of July and August, all that dry, non-moisture air rises off of Death Valley and does nothing to diffract or deflect the light and soften it. You don't get any clouds oftentimes in the mornings up there, et cetera. So rather than continue to go out and get disappointed by that great sunrise shot I was looking for over the peak in the grand landscape or something, this particular morning was when I went out where I realized, even before this, I love being out in the mornings, regardless of if I produce an image or I don't. And this was a particular thing, like I'm going to take the camera, but I'm going to walk around before I have my cup of coffee. The kind of sun's coming up, et cetera. And I was just allowing myself a little bit of that curiosity of what am I being drawn to? And I found myself really drawn to the outside of this dead pine tree or dying pine tree. And these are old branches that the tree kind of grew around, or when the branches fell off, they kind of had different levels of hardness, et cetera. Well, what happened there is the light started to hit the granite and started to reflect off of the light, off of the granite and hit the tree. So you get this reflected light in the shadows, but deep reflected light. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I have this opportunity to now create really personally meaningful photography. So I took this image, and there's another one that's in my portfolio that I took literally like 45 seconds later of refracted light within the water. And this was that point in time where I kind of realized, well, geez, I'm now not being told what to photograph. I'm not going out with preconceptions of what I need to photograph, that I'm actually really discovering what I'm being drawn to and how I want to represent that particular aspect. And so it kind of was a very quick progression soon after to make the decision to go full-time pro, in part from an image like this one, where I was like, wow, I just responded to what I was feeling and seeing within the environment, and felt like I could replicate that kind of experience again. And I have been fortunate to do so time and time again, kind of going forward.
Well, this echoes a conversation I was just having with someone, that photography is certainly, it's about whatever the end image is, but probably 75, 80, 90%, depending, is about the experience, like the moment and the seeing and that, the spark that happens in that moment. It sounds like you had that with this. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. If I saw this tree, I would go bonkers. It's amazing. It's amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those different pivot points in your journey, letting us in, sort of an inside scoop on the evolution that you talked about when we first started chatting. I'm gonna pivot a little bit and ask you a few questions around maybe it's almost like lessons learned and creativity and whatnot. And I'm curious about advice. Like photographers are, I know, right? Well, there's unsolicited, solicited advice. There's all sorts of things. And I'm curious, I don't know which one you would rather go towards, either the best or the worst advice that you've been given. Or if you've given bad or good advice that you like to pass on.
I can go try to grab my wife, and she could take up the whole rest of our time talking about the bad advice I've given. But no, I'm kidding. So. I think I talked earlier about the social media advice was definitely some of the, for me personally, some of the worst advice I got, especially in the early stages of my creativity and journey. I was not creating for myself. I was creating for the gram. So that was really rough. But it's funny when I go back to bad advice, there's echoes of my childhood or anything all the way through of the advice my father gave oftentimes of things like the dumb suffer and talks cheap, et cetera. Those used to be his just regular monikers that I think were oftentimes within my mind, which led sometimes to things like perfectionism, which can demonstrate itself all the way through our work, or being overly hard on ourselves. So I would find myself sometimes out there like, oh my God, why didn't you see that coming? That, or think about the weather conditions, or know that was going to happen, or why didn't you capture it this way or shift over there, et cetera, versus giving myself some compassion for being learning, giving myself compassion for not always getting it right, or giving myself compassion for not getting it perfect and being okay with that. I know there's a lot of times I sell work that is not perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect to communicate that experience to the person. And so I'm avoiding massive, technical flaws or whatever else. But if, photographer that's going to review an image that I sell, some images that I sell would say, well, you have a little bit of clipping over here within the sky, or you're not following this particular composition rule, or there's this area of the color maybe is a little bit more saturated or whatever else. But that isn't what I care about when I'm communicating that experience to another, somebody that's wanting to put that in their home. They don't care that area may be a little oversaturated or the clipping's a little bit off or something else, as much as they care about what that image makes them feel or discover. So rather than sit on an image I didn't perfectly capture or perfectly process, if I feel like I can still convey what I'm looking for, I'll bring those kind of things forward. That's not a license to bring forward subpar work, right. But it is a license to give ourselves a little bit of compassion in terms of it doesn't have to be perfect for all people to find value in what you're doing. And you yourself don't have to be perfect to find value in all things that you're doing as well. And I think we can carry those messages on multiple fronts.
Yeah. They need to embrace that idea. I think it's in Japanese culture and maybe in others of and I know it's in Native American, like they will weave in a strand that is imperfect in a rug because nothing can be perfect.
Exactly.
Or you fill the crack in the ceramic with gold to actually highlight the part that is broken.
Well, I like that. I'm going to start telling everybody that there's something wrong with every picture. Go find it.
Go find it. There's Where's Waldo?
And I think it's not about not noticing. Like, it's one thing as an artist or a photographer to put work out that we don't, that there's some part of it that's deficient and that we don't know it's deficient, so to speak. Versus putting work out as an artist and knowing there's some element of that picture that's not perfect, and that's okay. And I think that's, what you're talking about within the philosophy. What I'm talking about is specifically like I would discard images that weren't perfect versus like acknowledging, well, this part of the image is not perfect. And that's okay. But at least I'm aware of that. So
yeah. So I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Just own it.
I
meant for that bridge to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I intentionally shot that out of focus, or my lens smear was there. And I didn't remove the, no. Those are the kind of things. And the worst part is when you try to put a piece of work out there that you want to be nice, and then all of a sudden you're like, I forgot to remove the dust spots. Oh.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That happened. I submitted something and I look at it and I'm like, oh, ouch.
Yeah, or you can look at the pictures behind me. These are ones I don't, not some of them are, but some of the ones behind me I don't sell. The ones in particular of the white sand dunes and the Saguaro National Park. I forgot to do my brightening stage I do to print my prints before I printed them on metal. So I sent the wrong print. So these ones won't be getting sold because they're too dark, but hey, they still look good on my wall. Yeah.
And it goes with the, you're doing it for yourself, not for other people. So
exactly.
If it makes you happy, then that's what counts. So you haven't said anything about, the other classic thing that I hear artists and photographers talking about, which is sort of getting stuck, running into creative ruts. Has that happened to you? And if so, how did you move through that?
Yeah. So I'm kind of coming out of one right now, actually. Not surprisingly, because it happens to every one of us. The latter half of 2023, let's just say it wasn't one for the books in a wide variety of whatever reasons. I got hit by a drunk driver. I had this lifelong trip I've been planning to Pakistan that got canceled. I ended up I got really bad bronchitis. I had some major kind of tragic family issues happen and so on and so forth. And so these personal things, as good and resilient as we can build ourselves to be, sometimes can add up into our creative life, kind of all the way through. And so it's hard sometimes as artists and as humans, which I think can be interchanged, because we are humans first, artists second, in most cases, to recognize we're in a little bit of a funk. And to first step, I guess, is that awareness around that. And then the second step isn't to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and, suck it up, pull up that upper lip, get back on the horse, as much as it is, once again, going back to an earlier theme of giving ourselves some compassion, and then returning back to the fundamentals and giving ourselves some patience. So for me, it was really recognizing, wow, it's been a rough couple months. And then giving myself that compassion with what I've experienced or what I've gone through to then return back to what I consider my fundamentals, So journaling, it's a big thing for me. So really just writing out what's going on, going back through old journals and reading my things to remind myself, wow, I've had plenty of other struggles in the time. Meditating, getting back into my meditation routine, reading. So creativity books, photography books, non-related to any sort of artistry, just reading and getting out of my mind a little bit. And then the bigger part was just returning back to or getting back into nature on a more regular basis as well. So even if I wasn't going to be out there photographing, or maybe specifically was because I wasn't to be out there hiking for a period of time, I couldn't run or bike for several months because of the accident. But being out there and just being present with that and just reinvigorating that love has really been a big part of kind of how I've moved through creative points and blocks. And it's fascinating because you can't put a timeline on any of this. Like, well, I'm going to get out of this, or even see it. But just like a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden it was like, I opened up Lightroom and it was like, oh my God, look at all these beautiful images. This is incredible. Which is, I swear, for months and months, I'd look at Lightroom and be like, ugh, I can't even do it. I can't even look at it. I didn't process a single image for a couple months. And now I'm able to get back in a little bit and hopefully start to turn out some new work here soon.
Yeah, dude, I am, I'm glad you're recovering, it sounds like, from the accident and able to get back out there.
Yeah. I'm 46 now. I'm not 21 anymore. And I definitely getting hit in a high impact by a drunk driver. I realized my body doesn't bounce back like when I was 18 playing football or something anymore. But that's part of the acceptance part of life. So, as you know.
Well, yeah, and I'm recovering from hip replacement, and there's a certain amount of acceptance and compassion that you have to have for yourself as you're healing, and that can be anything from a physical thing that keeps you from getting out there to an emotional, mental kind of trauma that can be happening. We've all had our share.
I think we're so fortunate. I mean, every day I'm grateful. And I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person, but every single day I'm grateful, for the gift of artistry, and the opportunity to practice photography. And in particular is it gives us this mechanism to reset ourselves and to rediscover and kind of reground ourselves back through there. And I think, if I look back on my past, before I was an artist, or even before I was consider myself a photographer, I didn't have that mechanism. So I would look externally for other things to help reset, bring me back. Now I can look internally, kind of that intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I can look internally and realize I have most of the tools I need, or I have a mechanism to express as I'm reinvigorating, and going through the patterns and the cycles helps as well.
Well, you mentioned something towards the top of our time together that I want to circle back to, and that's around like, what can we be doing now or thinking or learning now that might help us later?
Yeah. So there's a lot. I think I've touched on some of these kind of theories and concepts that our creative self will thank us for. One of the ones that I just keep coming back to for myself is just that the self-compassion or going easy on myself. And really seeing that I can't, this is the idea, you can't drive a car through the rear view mirror kind of thing. But so much of these things that I'm doing that I don't have the full answer for why am I really drawn to a particular project or an idea or a concept. are going to make more sense in the future. And I talk about the seeds of creativity oftentimes when I'm teaching or doing other things. And I think this is exactly one of those things where I'm still finding ways to kind of curate and cultivate my creativity and my creative mind, whether that's reading other types of books, absorbing the work from other artists as well. I'm not out there to plagiarize. I'm not out there to copy. I'm not out there to replicate anything. But if I can spend some time getting lost in Eric Bennett's, one of Eric Bennett's books, I love both of his books so much, about the mindset, the reading of the light, the understanding, the nuance of how he's processed his work, as an example, is absolutely fantastic. Or with TJ's Ebb and Flow book, which is absolutely fantastic. He sees the world in a way I have no comprehension of, and that in itself is absolutely beautiful. So for me to get lost in how he sees water and interacts with that a little bit is great, because it's seeding different ways I may interact with the environment that I'm passionate about. It isn't like, okay, cool, I'm going to go up to the Pacific Northwest and I'm going to put a tracker in TJ's car and follow him everywhere he goes, 10 feet behind him and take every picture he does. No, that's not at all. I want to bring that same type of energy into my environment, how I choose to photograph.
Yeah, we should put a tracker in his car and just see.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea anyways. But.
Yeah, it does. Sorry, TJ. So when it comes to feeding your creative self, you've mentioned a few things that are kind of photography related. I think and I'm not going to pronounce her name correctly right now, and I'm interviewing her for another episode. Colleen Minnick. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Minnick.
I think she used the phrase creativity cross-training a couple of years ago. It was like this, passing thing, and it really stuck with me. So I'm curious about how you cross-train with your creativity. What else feeds you?
Yeah, Colleen was on my speaker series 2 weeks ago, and I adore Guy Tall. Guy's been on twice. Guy is a very low key, as many of us know in reading his work, very low key, very introverted kind of guy, and brings forth this. And then Colleen was the week after Guy. So then we go from Guy, very reserved and calm in his presentations, and then Colleen just like throwing it all at you with so much enthusiasm and
bubbles.
Bubbles, exactly. Bubbles. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that part about it. So I creatively cross-train in a wide variety of ways. And I try to invoke this as best I can. And I probably lost this a little bit when I went through that really big kind of struggle last fall of every single day doing something that's feeding my creativity. So this isn't necessarily cross-training per se as much as it is. I don't photograph every day. In fact, oftentimes when I'm home, I don't photograph at all. And that's different than a lot of people. Some people go out on a regular basis. Freeman Patterson was on, like I mentioned, he said he goes into his garden every day and photographs. And he's 87, which is fantastic. He has a huge garden, and which is really great. But for me, I'm wanting to feed it a little bit and feed my soul a little bit every single day. So creative writing, for just simply some creative reading, setting aside a little bit of time for myself every day was a big part. The creative cross training I also do is making sure that I don't feel like I'm completely shackled to or beholden to my camera where I need to go out. So I was in Mexico a couple weeks ago. Camera didn't even go with me on the trip. So if there's beautiful situations or scenes, I'm either going to be taking it in with my eyes or taking it in with my smartphone. And in this case, it was mostly just with my eyes, which was fantastic. And then I also do recreational activities that have nothing to do with photography. I love running. I love cycling. Out there within the natural environment, and seeing the world in a different way, at a different speed, a different pace, and breathing out within that environment is just going to be different. And I can't tell you how many times I've come back from a run with a really great creative idea, a really good idea, kind of all the way through, or back from a backpacking trip, and it's like, this is where I came up with nature photography classes in the speaker series, for example, was on a backpacking trip, solo backpacking trip by myself, and I was like, I should do this, and then I could do this, and then I should do this, and brought it to fruition.
Just goes ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, exactly. it kind of feeds
Yeah.
off each other. I mean, things kind of jolt together.
Yeah. Yeah. I found like I will come up with some pretty bold ideas if I'm moving in some
Yeah.
way, whether I'm exercising, walking, and the camera is something that I get into a flow and I'm connecting with things, but it's different to put it. I think every once in a while we have to put it down, like you're saying, and just be in relationship directly without the intermediary, I guess.
Yeah. No, and one of the, it's not as much creativity cross training, but one of the worst mistakes we can make as photographers is getting onto a new scene or a situation we haven't seen before and immediately deploying our tripod and putting our camera on. Absolute worst thing we can do. And, when I look at my scenes and situations, I've created the most personally impactful images. I spent a lot of time in that scene before I even considered taking my camera out of my bag. Just absorbing it, walking the scene, understanding maybe what I'm drawn to, what I want to capture, what I want to bring forth before I took a picture and or even thought about what picture I wanted to take. And that's been hugely beneficial because oftentimes I see on workshops, if I have people deploy their tripods, they won't move. And so I actually encourage people, let's not deploy the tripods until we get to the very tail end of the day. There's so much we can do moving around, and let's move. And I go around and physically move my people around, like, okay, move on to this place or whatever else.
Keep them.
I don't have a cattle prod or anything, so that's good.
No, that's good. That's good. No tasers or.
I don't think they're legal in California, but so.
Yeah. I'll have to check Michigan laws.
You could be good to go.
I could be good to go. Except my problem is I'm allergic to tripods. So I wouldn't be one of those people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned nature photography classes. So maybe as we wrap up our conversation, would love to hear a little bit about what have you got on tap there and how can people get involved?
Yeah. So we got a lot coming up. I got my list over here somewhere of the speakers. And so I can't always keep track of it. I think we've had 31 speakers on.
Wow.
Starting with Mark Adamus. The most recent one was Bruce Barnbaum on Tuesday. And then everyone in between, many of the people that have been guests or will be guests on here. And then we have, we're wrapping up a creativity series on next Saturday with Kai Horning from Germany, really kind of bringing it home. And then I'm doing one on mood and mystery with Michelle Sons, Michael Fry, and Franca Gabler. And then we're moving right into one on small scenes and macro with Charles Needle, Sarah Marino, just confirmed Sandra Bartacha today. So really excited about that. And then I got a whole bunch more beyond that. And what's exciting about these speaker series is these are the artists themselves presenting to you. You have the opportunity to ask questions live. There's image critique sometimes. There's post-processing demonstrations. There's technique demonstrations. And then you get permanent access to the materials. So if you sign up for a class or a course, it isn't like, oh, here's your 24-hour window to watch it or whatever. They're spaced out, usually one a week. Maybe one every 2 weeks. So you get plenty of time to absorb it, go back to it, and go all the way through. So feedback continues to be extremely positive on this. I literally have probably 2 years of speaker series lined up going forward. The other part of it, which is exciting, is we've set aside already $25,000. We paid out $10,000 in 2023. We're going to pay out another $10,000 this year. We already have money set aside for 25 for the inspired creator. So people like Beth herself submitted an application along with a whole bunch of other really worthy people to bring forth creativity projects or photography projects as well. So we just did the selections of the 2024 inspired creators, which I'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks, and some just absolutely incredibly inspiring photography projects, nature photography projects in particular, that I'm hoping to help people get them going, give them some support financially, give them some support for the platform, and the customers and the clients, I should say, that are part of it. So it's been really exciting. It's been really rewarding. I'll give you one example of just how rewarding it was this morning. I got an email from a longtime participant who said that 40 years ago, she was backpacking in the slot or slit canyons, depends on what you call them, and was just completely blown away. And so you think 40 years ago, Antelope Canyon, or 40 years ago, Buckskin Gulch, these places that are so common. And her and her husband ended up buying 2 black and white pictures that have hung in their living room for the last 40 years. And Bruce Barnbaum was giving his presentation on Tuesday night. And she had this, oh my God, aha moment that I think these are Bruce Barnbaum images. And sure enough, she went into the kitchen, went into the living room or whatever, had to pull them down off the wall. And sure enough, they were Bruce Barnbaum. She had no idea who the photographer was. She had no idea like anything about it, but had been enjoying, in her words, had been enjoying that picture for almost 40 years and now had the story and the connection and the face to go with it. And I got goosebumps when I read that because it was so... the power of photography to unite across multiple periods of time, all the way through. So it's just been hugely enriching and rewarding. And I'm so excited to keep continuing it going forward. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's what a beautiful story. And it echoes what you were saying about AI and what we were talking about with authenticity and, how much more meaningful are those photographs even going to be now that she has made that connection?
For sure. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Lovely. And the other word that comes up for me when I think of you, besides authenticity, is generosity. And it's so generous with sharing yourself, your time, your stories, your resources, and really grateful that we were able to have this conversation. And I hope that I'll have you back at some point, in the coming year or so, and we'll have another conversation.
I'd love to come back and
lots to explore.
You. Yeah, there's lots of, it's just so much fun. I think there's, people say, well, what happens when you run out of topics for the speaker series? I'm like, are you kidding me?
What? Impossible.
It's impossible within the realms of what we deal with, and the insights we have and the images we create and the personal reflections to ever run out of materials for our lives. And I think, for me, my audience there is largely, people that are retired or approaching retirement age, and are looking for kind of that cultivation of a lifelong, bringing forth the meaning in the last, half or third of their lives. And I think that in itself is really exciting. It's not a one and done type of thing. It's for us, we can continue to cultivate new ways to see the world up until our last days. Hopefully those last days are going to continue to last, but it's pretty exciting when you think about it.
Yeah. Yep. And you can't have too many creative people and people out there, really experiencing the world and connecting with it. So thank you for everything that you do to facilitate that. And it's been
my pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Nic.
My pleasure. All right. Thanks, Beth. Bye all.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by nature photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.